Hello, Tuesday after Monday, and thanks for the comments to why each 10 years we're getting richer and richer, or where until perhaps now. I've pulled some of the comments out and put them into a Word doc, so I've forgotten where they've come from, so it'll just be mixed up. But perhaps that's best. I'll just start and see how we go. Prior to that, the US still had their infrastructure in place after World War II, so factories set out to making stuff for those who had been feeling deprived through the war years. Europe had a lot of rebuilding to do. There's plenty of money to be made in rebuilding and construction. So after the Second World War, which is a sensible place to start, the United States had everything in place. After the Great Depression, they'd built up lots of infrastructure. They had the factories whirring away for war work, and as noted there, they had a deprived populace that wanted to buy stuff. In Europe, especially in the United Kingdom, in Europe, let's say, there was a lot of devastation and there needed to be a lot of reconstruction. And there is money in reconstruction, but not that much. And when the factories got going again and did produce things, what often had to happen, especially in the United Kingdom, was that anything that was manufactured was tried. The attempt was to sell it externally to someone else for foreign currency to come into the country. So the manufacturing work was done, the stuff was exported, money came into the country, and then for the United Kingdom especially, the money then would go straight to the United States to pay off war loans, which I don't think were actually paid off until the Gordon Brown government. I don't think they were actually paid off till about 10 years ago. So there weren't many internal transactions, let's say, after the Second World War in the United Kingdom, and we're going to come to that. And in Europe, they were building themselves up slowly as well. But no, I'm not going to be able to get into this, but I will note it now. Since the Second World War, there have been real differences made in the way countries have built themselves up. For example, France concentrated very much on planning and building a very solid infrastructure to then work on. The United Kingdom was much more higgledy-piggledy. Technical word there. Right, moving on. I'm guessing it has something to do with the cumulative effects of infrastructure build-out. Big, expensive, long-lasting hardware accumulates over time. Electrical grids, water lines, phones, buildings, etc., relieving each subsequent generation from the overhead of that real expense. The implication here is, I think, that they back then built up lots of infrastructure and actually were poorly paid for what they did, because most of it was manual labour, because it was shovels and digging. Obviously there were architects and planners, but it was basically shovels and digging until pneumatic drill machinery came in. But there was more of that, but you wouldn't get much more money for either building the big diggers or for using the big diggers. But that was all put in place for us then, later on in the 60s, 70s, 80s, etc., or even 70s, 80s and on, to then play on. And then we played on afterwards with lots of different things, but playing on the infrastructure that was so hard built for us. And from that, there was a tweet last night, I think it was from Kate Mackenzie, but that really doesn't matter. And it's about the Hurricane Sandy thing. And I retweeted it because I thought it was something that should go out. It's not totally deep and meaningful, but it's, aren't you glad we have an economy that allocates capital to Groupon and Zynga instead of next generation power grids right about now? That's an obvious, it's Hurricane Sandy was hit. The power grids were going down because they were just the old power grids that we're still playing on, and we haven't built out new clever stuff that should be impervious even to hurricanes, or at least would have standby systems in place. We haven't built on anything really better. The superpower grids, there's one or two around, but there really aren't. We are not putting money into infrastructure now, good solid infrastructure. A lot of capital would go to companies like Groupon and Zynga, which would probably be on the NASDAQ, whizzy companies that just fly digits around the place. No, well, they aid things. Yeah, let's move on. 1. Women entering the workforce and getting paid to do work as opposed to doing work at home and not getting paid for it has raised disposable family income. That must be a great big factor in the strata of charts getting bigger and bigger, because more of the household are working. And those are household charts, so it could well be mother, father, and 2 children working in the household. But the children obviously would then have the ability to go off and set up their own households. So definitely the women coming into the workforce, that famous Fed chart that I always use of the women coming in and working, must have a lot to do with the disposable income available. Households have fewer children, declining birth rate, and hence disposable income adjusted for family size has gone up. That chart had something to do with adjusted for family size, but I didn't quite understand what. So yes, fewer children, meaning that there would be less women having to stay at home, because if you've got 3, you're more likely to stay at home, would you not? Than if you only had 1. You can farm out 1 easier than you can farm out 3. Not an expert in that, I am not. To attempt to answer the question, I would guess that improvements in technology has given us greater wealth, and that ranges from higher yields in farming to cost reductions in mass-produced goods, coupled with the fall in labour costs. There's a lot in there, isn't there? So certainly we've got improvements in technology that's given us greater wealth, but there's an awful lot. Those 2 parts of the sentence, there's a big lot in between. Improvements in technology giving us greater wealth. One and the other may be true, but there's a big thing in between that we're trying to explain. High yields in farming and all sorts of things. As soon as these great big tractors could just go across the plain going blah, 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 blah. Much more efficient. But we've got to know in our minds why that gives us greater wealth. And it's not established in my mind. It might be in yours. But I haven't got it. I'm in a way, I'm sure it's true. But I haven't got the A, B, C, D of exactly how it happens. That ranges from higher yields in farming to the cost reductions in mass-produced goods. Again, they're cheaper, the goods, but do cheaper goods actually give us more disposable income? Yes, this must be true. If we think of buying a fridge, freezer or something, a washing machine, in the old days, it was a huge item. Now, I know we've got trouble with our fridge freezer, that's why it came to mind, and it's almost a disposable thing. I mean, it's not. I mean, it's €300 or something, but it's kind of, it's not a great big thing like it used to be. So they're cheaper, but I have more money to be able to buy it as well. After the Second World War, in the 50s, forget it, 60s, Even buying a washing machine in the 60s was a big purchase for most people in Europe anyway. America were probably ahead of the game, and they had plenty. It was just a normal thing to have one, but there was a lot. It was always a big purchase. Now not so much. They've kept the price down and made them more efficient, but I think it's more that we have more money to spend on the white good than actually the price of the white good coming down. I don't know. I'll leave that open to you. Fall of labour costs. And again, the fall of labour costs, we must be talking about their labour costs, as in made in Taiwan, made in Japan, now made in China. Their labour costs might have been cheaper, because we have the problem that if it's our labour costs that are cheaper, then we get paid less disposable income. Right. I'll move on to the third and last one, which is Ray Dalio. So we've done our bit, and I think we've set it up quite well. And I'll just start off with the Ray Dalio thing, which has been up in the menu for a while. Ray Dalio template for understanding. Bridgewater Associates, that's who he works for, or at least set up. It's his place. How the economic machine works. Now, this is, if it's not right at the top, I think I could have carved this straight from the top of his document. How the economic machine works. A transaction-based approach. An economy is simply the sum of the transactions that make it up. Now, we're going to talk, hopefully, a lot about things, but this is the main sentence. This is the big thing point. An economy is simply the sum of the transactions that make it up. Certainly true for GDP, but all economy is transactions. A transaction is a simple thing. Because there are a lot of them, the economy looks more complex than it really is. If instead of looking at it from the top down, we look at it from the transaction up, it is much easier to understand. A transaction consists of the buyer giving money or credit to a seller, and the seller giving a good, a service, or a financial asset to the buyer in exchange. A market consists of all the buyers and sellers making exchanges for the same things, e.g. a wheat market consists of different people making different transactions for different reasons over time. An economy consists of all of the transactions in all of its markets. So, while seemingly complex, an economy is really just a zillion simple things working together, which makes it look more complex than it really is. An economy is simply the sum of the transactions that make it up. Each of us and our individual transactions multiplied by all of them makes the economy. So we can go back to our picture after the Second World War in Europe. Things were depressed. There were not many transactions going on. There was even rationing in the United Kingdom till the mid-50s, I think. Rationing means not that the amount of transactions were quashed down. And if you did transact, it was only for a small thing. So it would be small stuff going into the transaction bucket. As we move and back up the infrastructure, and the money could stay in the economy more and more, there were more transactions made within the economy. And now we need to think why we're say up to the 70s and 80s, and we're making as many transactions, all sorts of transactions, take us up into the Clinton years, and then into the Thatcher Bush years. Throw Reagan in as well. We are making lots and lots and lots of things that lots and lots of people want, and we're transacting for them. More women are working, there's just more transactions, basically. We're getting more and more transactions up until these days now, where credit has to come in as an idea that I didn't mention there. It was mentioned in comments. But the comment kind of, if I didn't use it, I don't think I did. The comment was because credit is a short-term thing. You've got to pay the bastard stuff back. There's no point saying that credit made for more transactions over a 50-year period, unless you're saying that more and more and more and more and more and more and more people are getting credit. For one person, you only get enough credit to pay back. You only earn so much in a lifetime. You don't get more of anything by more. You don't make more transactions because you took on credit. The chances are you are going to make less. You might make more earlier on in your life, but later in life you've got to pay that credit back, so you will make less transactions. But I don't want it to be an argument about credit. But yes, certainly we've lumped credit on. But I'd like to leave that to a greater extent. No, if you think it's so important, put it in. But slightly to the side, because we know about the credit and the debt that we've built up. But it's much more, I think, to do with the more and more and more transactions that we're doing. And for each transaction, there's a little bit of profit for everybody. Obviously, multiplied by big number for the owners, they get a big number. But for each of us, we also get a cut of each transaction as well. Something will accrue to us. That might be becoming less and less, but we get a cut of each transaction as well. So the more transactions that are transacted in our economy, the chances are everybody is getting wealthier. So I'll leave it there because I've gone on a bit. But the big take from here is we're moving to Ray Dalio. An economy is simply the sum of the transactions that make it up, and see if we can move some ideas going from that, or whatever else you think.